Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
So we've got Dorian. Thank you for coming on the show. This has almost been a year-long goal of mine to have you on my podcast.
Well, I apologize. It took a year to get here.
You're a busy guy. So let me make sure we've got the screen of your slides. What we're going to dive into today is what I am passionate about is how to train the whole athlete from the inside out to be a fat adapted athlete, to improve athletic performance, and of course longevity. I think a lot of people forget about that part of it. So I've been a big fan of your product, Keto Mojo, and I'm a big fan of also testing blood sugar levels and ketones, because we don't know if we're eating the right macronutrients based on our individuality unless we test. So I appreciate what you are doing, and kind of talk about what your role is in Keto Mojo and how it all came about.
Yeah, a little bit of the back history. Back in 2015, I was nearly 207 pounds. I was all the biomarkers for metabolic syndrome, on anti-depressants. Everything's going good, going bad, should I say. And a friend said, hey, you really should try a ketogenic diet. So I read up all the science on it from Volek and Finney, from the Fast Society, and Eric Westman, Taubes, all those great writers and presenters. And the science was just so perfect for me. It just resonated. So I went on a well-regulated ketogenic diet, and I was testing both my blood glucose and my ketones at that time. And with over a period of 6 months, my weight just came off. 47 pounds, which is over a sack of concrete. And if you go through, I think on the next slide, you kind of like get a bit of an idea. As my disclaimer, I'm not a doctor, just play before. And yes, I'm the founder of Keto Mojo, so I am biased. I have been keto since 2015. And actually, it's funny that here it says Europe. We actually launched today for the first time in Europe. So that's pretty cool. But we also, my wife and I are the founder of the Ketogenic Foundation, which is 501c3. Actually, it said pending on here, but we got it this week. Yay.
Great. Got two big wins this week.
Some big wins. There's been a very big win, but to get our 501c3 it's just awesome. And actually last year we managed to raise over $500,000 for that charity. And the goal is to fund clinical trials and studies into the efficacy and use of ketogenic therapies for the benefit of humankind. So that's my disclaimer. I am biased, so we can flip on to the next thing that is over there. And as you can see,
that hot guy.
You can see the fat guy before that on that one. But without doubt, measurement is the first step that leads to control. And I think most athletes get this more than the weight loss people, because they're using their watt hours off on their bicycles. They're working out what their pace is. They're very clear of their personal records. They're saying how they're evaluating their performance as they go through and coming on those sides. So to my mind is, why aren't you evaluating your fuel? And we can flip through the next 3 little signs here, because it's one of my...
Well, that's the thing what you're saying on this slide. If you can't measure something, you can't manage it. If you can't manage it, you can't control it. And that's exactly what I keep talking about. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, it is really trying to get data-driven results. I mean, as a business person, every month I go and look at my P&L report and I look at my balance sheet. Why don't we do that as humans for ourselves? We really need to take a page out of a business person's book there and go like, well, what is our balance sheet like? How is our month been like? How did my sleep actually go? How many times did I make it to the gym? What was my pace? What was my work? And how did my performance change based upon the dietary choices I'm making? So we can move into the next couple of slides from here.
And I'll just add to that, as I've become, I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner, and I just became a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, where we focus on the scientific approach to improving fat loss, performance, and health, is that you need to test and not guess. And that's the same thing. What we do is functional lab testing. And I have everyone get a Keto Mojo and test, because we have no idea when we're working on their lifestyle habits, if they're eating the right foods for themselves, as well as we don't know what's going on underneath. So I say, looking under the hood of your car, and the amount of money people spend on their car, or, you know, on triathlon gear and all that, you know, it's amazing how people just don't do it on their own health, but they'll do it on all the gadgets and the equipment.
Yeah, and when it comes to that one, it comes to the person's bio-individuality. This is a famous Israeli study here. It was using 800 people over 46,000 meals. And it showed a high variability in the response to identical meals, a high variability. And what that means is that the recommended guidelines essentially have limited utility, because you have to look at what's going on with that individual. Say, for instance, this endurance athlete is maybe somebody like me, who's later on in their life, going to be 50 this year, has done a lot of metabolic damage to his body beforehand. Pancreas isn't working as the way that it should have done, so it's not secreting. The way that I will respond to a cookie or a banana, or maybe to a deviled egg, which is what I normally eat right now, or to a piece of jerky, or maybe to something cauliflower rice, is going to be completely different to somebody else.
Yeah.
You're going to have some endurance athletes who, God bless them, they've been clean eating all of their lives, and if they've been keto all of their lives, that's absolutely fantastic. But we have to see what a person's baseline is like beforehand. So that's the learning what they're like every morning, to get an idea of who is this individual, what is their style. Because if we come on to the next one on the bio-individuality side, I mean, there's a lot of different influences that come on into play. So if you take a look at, as Dr. Naisha Winters says, about the terrain of the individual, and this is actually one of Naisha's slides. I'm using it with her permission. Thanks, Naisha. Great book, Metabolic Approach to Cancer. If you haven't read it, read it. It's even applicable for endurance athletes, because we've got to take a look at.
We lost you. So the metabolic approach to cancer, saying, whoops, just lost him. So we just lost your sound, Dorian. So we'll just wait for the connection to get better. There you are. We got you back, I think. Or slow motion speaking. Hold on. One moment. See, technical difficulties. So here, I think we're getting back to reception, but bioindividuality is key to looking at your macronutrients, what you should eat. And I keep talking about how you should eat and why you're eating, but really looking at your individual needs. And we'll see, we just lost Dorian, so let's see if he comes back on the call. But I think what we do in FDN program is talking about the functional lab testing, but also metabolic typing, because everyone's different. And I also like people using genetic testing and importing their raw data into programs as DNA fit, because you can really see the differences in even this chart here that Dorian's sharing, but everybody's different. And I think looking at the one size fits all approach that everyone eats the same food. Are you back, Dorian?
Did you get me back?
Yeah, I see you back now.
Oh.
Sorry. I was carrying a conversation on by myself while you were disconnected. Sorry about that. Technical difficulties. So we're just talking about bioindividuality, and you were talking about the book, Metabolic Approach to Cancer. And then disappeared again. Are you there?
It's a fantastic book.
Okay.
And in, I don't know what's happening here. Do we have everything? I'm making sure everything in this world is shut down on my machine, so nothing is pulling
shut everything off.
down. I'm kind of like, what is going on? Because we haven't had any of this happen to us. And normally on this connection, I got the fattest pipe I can get in this small town. Okay, are we good here?
Yep, you're good. So the metabolic approach to cancer, and then we're talking about bioindividuality and what's on this screen. And I totally agree, because that's what an FDN they're big fans of metabolic typing. And I just mentioned to everyone, I like using DNA Fit and correlating that with their food sensitivity labs, and then putting that with their Keto Mojo glucose testing and ketones, because you don't know unless you do kind of individualize it like you're saying. So go ahead with this information. Looks great.
I just want to go preach right there. I mean, like, you are so way ahead of so many people by what you're saying. It's like music to my ears when I absolutely fantastic. And so that's, I'm realize that glucose and ketones is just a little bit of a data set that adds to your entire compendium. It's like your dashboard of what you need. So it's really a small part. And if we take a look at the different types of tests, I think that's the next thing that we kind of like get to, is understanding how to test your ketones and what type to do, because you've got blood, you've got breath, and you've got urine. And I think,
you want me to flip the switch or the screen? Oh, that's metabolic pathways screen now.
Misconception, definitely. Yeah, I love this one. This is kind of like, hey, if we focus on one thing, but this is what the metabolic pathways of the body are really. And, you know, we're down in that bottom corner where you see pyruvate down there and then acetyl-CoA. I mean, it is really, really, really complex. And that's why when we talk about all of those, that terrain that is around you, and looking at all the other different pieces, this helps you try to get a little bit of a picture of yourself in this context.
Well, I'm studying mitochondria function, because I think that's my other big fascination is, you know, all of this, and then look at how you're optimizing mitochondria. This is kind of what I keep looking at in the books I'm reading that are like overwhelming. It took 2 hours to read 10 pages, but it's because it looks like this.
I know. And everybody tries to boil it down into simplistic numbers, but you have to take a look at all of the areas, and it's sort of like sometimes getting a feel for self is far more important that comes into play.
Okay.
So when you're looking at the biomarkers, and, you know, some of this is, we put it down of obviously checking out your macros to begin with. Certainly learning your macros and your micronutrients is great. And there's some fantastic products out there like Chronometer or Carb Manager that can help it. Glucose and ketones is excellent. I really like the GKI fasted in the morning. That's the glucose ketone index. That's the relation between your glucose measurements and your ketones. The morning one is the best one. Other parts of the day, you might get co-founders caused by either prior exercise or food that you're eating. Understanding your heart rate variability through stress, elite HRV is great. How is your microbiome doing? The Bristol scale is awesome. You can track that. And this is actually a screenshot courtesy of Dave Krasinski of Heads Up Health. A shout out to him and his product there. If you want to geek out on every single biomarker that's going, Heads Up Health is absolutely fantastic for doing that. It pulls in a huge number of different data sets. Obviously, understanding your weight, your composition, bringing in fitness, things like Strava, Garmin, MyFitnessPal. You're all used to tracking those from your bike, your wattage, and those things. And even if you're doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy, a lot of athletes, especially NFL athletes, use hyperbaric oxygen for traumatic brain injury, but it's also great for bodily recovery and wound injury and things like that. So these are the data sets that you can bring into your entire dashboard to kind of like see, you know, if we think about a run, like, how was my run today? And it was like, it was crappy. Well, then why was that crappy? Was it that you didn't have that good sleep the night before? Had work been a problem and your stress was not going on there? Had you not been as clean on your diet? So you'd actually been sort of like not in a deeper state of ketosis, or you might not have even been in ketosis. Was your recovery worse because you weren't having the beneficial effects of the low inflammation from the ketogenic diet? And these are the things that can start to help guide you as an athlete in how to improve your metabolic edge. And I think the metabolic edge is really important on that side. So those are some great biomarkers in which you can kind of like take a look at.
So the screen on the right side with all the data, that's from an app called Heads Up Health. HEADS, Heads Up Health.
It is one that you have to pay for. I don't get any commissions. I actually know Dave, he helped me build my first app because I'm terrible at building apps and still am, but working on it. And it's a really good way as a data aggregator.
So he's using, or I see he's got Oura Ring and then MyFitnessPal.
There's a slide towards the end on this that actually shows all of the different kind of like API connections he has. He has probably nearly 30 or 40 that you can pull on in, including your health records from your doctor as well.
Wow. I've been wanting to create an app for 5 years since I created the holistic method, because it's 8 elements. And I want everyone to track and measure as this. And it's really hard to figure out how to do it, because Training Peaks we use for coaching athletes, but their metric system isn't so convenient to go, okay, how was your sleep? And if you can sync, you have to have Oura Ring.
Well, he just linked a Pro Portal as well. We've been playing it in the background, so you guys should connect on that one there, where you can actually, as coaches, you can see everything that's going on with your team that you're working with.
Yeah, because I work with, showing this on nutrition. Why we're talking about this is really figuring out what people should eat and how their body responds to food. And I just did a whole podcast yesterday on how do you feel afterwards? Do like you just were saying, did you have a good run or was it crappy? Did you have bloating or gas or your,
the microbiome, the Bristol scale can come on into play, and that's pretty easy. You just take a look around and go, oh, I'm a 7 today.
Yeah. So that means checking your poop, you guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to be as politically correct as for the audience as possible, but
I talk nutrition all the time. Pee and poop is just common topics here. Yeah. So let's go to the next one. So test, assess, address is missing Eddie, but talk about what we're looking at.
So if you go to the next slide, I talk about ketone measurement, but what type, and understanding the limitations or the advantages of each different test. So if you flip, there are 3 types of ketones that are in the body: acetoacetate, beta hydroxybutyrate, and acetone. Now, acetoacetate represents about 28% of the energy that is available to the body. It's a very volatile compound. It's easily shunted into beta hydroxybutyrate and back again, so it moves about quite a lot. And this is what it gets measured in your urine just during the first weeks of being on a ketogenic diet. It's kind of like spilled and wasted because your body hasn't yet got to the point of being fat adapted that the mitochondria are in a position to accept it. Beta hydroxybutyrate, that's what's measured in the blood. This is the gold standard that has been used in all clinical trials and studies pretty much since the dawn of time. It's a repeatable measurement. It's extremely good to be able to use that. And then new on the market is acetone. Mm-hmm. And acetone is about 2% of the energy that's available to the body. It's kind of like a byproduct, if you will, sort of like measuring an exhaust. So the questions that you have to ask is remember, I'm biased to blood here. So the validity of an acetone measurement, because it's a delayed response. If we go back to the different metabolic pathways that you saw earlier on, each one of these ketone bodies is used in different types of pathways. And so they're not all created equal, if they will. I think sometimes actually for athletes, acetone can be an interesting biomarker, and there's some interesting new ones on the market. You've got the level.
We just lost you again a little bit. Yeah. I can guess what you're saying.
That you come back.
Oh wait, so now you're back. We didn't hear what you said. What did you just mention? Sorry, your sound went off.
I apologize. So we have 3 with breath. You've got the level, which is about $600 to measure. You have a new one on the market called BioSense. That's about $300. The old guard is Ketonics by Michelle. It's about $170. The challenges with those is how that they will actually measure your breath. So it's an exhaust. So if measuring the exhaust, what does that tell you about what is in the tank of the car or how far that car could potentially go? It's sort of like a measure of utilization. And I think that the more studies need to be done on this, because the studies that were done on breath were done using gas chromatograph and mass spectrometers. And so far, nobody's actually correlated any breathalyzer back to their mass specs or the gas chromatographs, nor have they really done it properly to blood. So that's an interesting science part to it. We can go on to the different, so those are your 3 ketones.
Yeah.
And then if you get onto the next ones, we talk about how you measure them, and we can briefly go over urine, touch on blood, and touch a little bit more on breath.
So just to review for people, the 3 different ones, so you can see on the screen, but if you're listening, it's the acetoacetate and the beta hydroxybutyrate acid. That's why we say BHB, and that's the one that's in most of the supplements that you take. Correct? If people take it on just ketones, and then acetone.
And remember, there's 2 different types of beta hydroxybutyrate.
Yeah,
You've got the D and the L. It's like your hands, left hand and right hand. They both look like hands, but they are actually different.
Okay, and then next we'll go to the different testing.
Yeah, so urinalysis, really cheap, really easy to do that, but it's a homogulation of spilled ketones in the body. So effectively, they kind of work for maybe the first week or 2 weeks, but then after that, it's kind of like hard to actually use them as a reliable biomarker, because it's more subjective of gauging the color and the type on that one there. And their first role that they were designed for was to see if somebody is in ketoacidosis, which is 10 to 12 millimoles and above. And just let's remember, high ketones, ketoacidosis, only happens in the presence of high glucose. On monitors, if you get a high on your ketones, it'll always say check glucose, because it will want to make sure that you don't have glucose over like 240, because then you're kind of like, whoa, flags out here. Let's go get something sorted out. But that's only a very rare occurrence with type 1 diabetics generally, and a few type 2s depending on what's going on.
So the accuracy, I know a lot of people I read in different beginner keto people trying to figure out what to do and what to eat, and they're doing this test, but the reliability versus what we'll talk about, blood testing and the breath test, I would think, it's easy, as you said, it's cheaper, but is it going to be accurate? So are you really, do you get what you pay for, but are you getting the right information? So is it really worth it?
Right. It's reliability and repeatability that come on into play. So I don't really know of any real athletes who choose to use urinalysis.
So the next one, I've tried the
breath.
Level before.
Yeah, the Level's a pretty good device, but I mean, it's a $600 desktop device that's gone there. They worked really hard to peg that to a gas chromatograph and mass specs, which measure acetone in parts per million. So remember, what you're doing is you're expressing out into a machine, and what the Level does, it takes a known quantity, a volume of air, and then is able to measure that known quantity of air and give a fairly accurate result of acetone. And I think they've done a really good job on that. And maybe for an athletic studio, that might be an advantageous. Somebody who's maybe a little bit more affluent than me could afford a $600 one of those that comes into play. And there are some challenges that come on to using breath, is that any contaminants on the breath, and I think on the next slide I mentioned a little bit about it. Here we go. Alcohol, breath mints, mouthwashes, lozenges, tobacco, cigarettes. Obviously, we hope not too many athletes are smoking, but maybe if you're with the Hash House Harriers in England and you've had a pint of beer early in the morning and a cigarette and gone from your... They are nuts.
They are funny.
Maybe that wouldn't be good for them, but they might not be doing this and can give you a false positive, and in some cases they can actually cause the sensors to fail. So the nice thing about the Level, it's the only breath meter I know that you can actually replace the sensor, and you can actually also calibrate it. So understanding the ability to calibrate something and be able to replace a sensor and know whether or not it is or is not giving you correct data is key when you're measuring. So we can go on to the next slide.
I did try the Level, and I was trying to work with them and support them because I really like the company and the people behind it, but it was too complicated. And at my fitness studio that I just closed in October, but I owned a studio for 12 years, and people were not into what I was into. So they didn't really care about measuring their fat. They're just coming to work out. So get people to pay for it. And the process of doing it, it was a little complicated. So it didn't really work for me. But I think if you could do it at home, you know, maybe some people can do it, but it is hard with all these different things. So let's go into the blood.
But essentially what you're trying to do, but what you're trying to do is measure something that is in parts per million. And that's the challenge of all of the handheld breathalyzers. It's a very, very, very tiny molecule. Last breath that's coming out from that is what they're trying to measure. And that's really, really hard to do that with consistency and reliability. And that's why we come to the blood being the actual gold standard, because it's being used for diabetes and people adjusting their insulin. You have to be held to a higher caliber. And what I mean by that, and for us to get our FDA certification, and just beware that there are ketone meters that are out there that are not FDA certified on Amazon. It's a bit of the Wild West. So I would definitely check to see that if you're buying a ketone meter, make sure it says FDA certified. What we're seeing is an influx of Chinese meters under different brand names that were actually used for bovine use, and they're putting them out cheap on Amazon. So just check to ask if any meter is FDA certified, because to get FDA certification, you have to do 200 tests in a pediatric body, 200 tests in an adult, 200 tests in a geriatric body at low, medium, and high ketones. And each one of those tests has to be correlated to a bench blood lab test to ensure that you fit within a standard of deviation. Yeah. So this is when you see FDA certification or you see ISO 15197, you know that you're going to get something that correlates to a medical grade. And that's an important thing. You get repeatability and reliability on the standards. The other cool thing is all of the clinical trials and studies have been based on blood. So there's a good data set of information that comes to you. And then obviously you have real-time data points. This is telling you what's going on in your body at that moment, not over a period of time, which we would have got with the urinalysis. And so you get good control. And it's, since we started, we managed to reduce the price by 75% on ketone strips. So I started, it was $4, and now we're $1. So it's now a lot more affordable. Yeah. Yes, you got to prick your finger. You got to get some blood in the game here. And I know people go like, oh, does it hurt? I mean, there's some great modern devices like the Gentile that you can actually use on a sleeping baby. I actually adjust my Lancet device for the depth of my skin. I changed up to a 33 gauge needle rather than the 30 gauge needle because I've got good vascularity, so I can go for either thinner. And literally, I do it on the side of my camera there. I do it on the side of the finger here.
Oh, okay.
Don't use the tip. The tip is your most sensitive. That's how blind people read with Braille. So why would you do it on the tip in your most sensitive part? But if you do it sort of like halfway where the cuticle is, halfway between your cuticle and your pad there, on that side of your finger, there's a lot less nerve endings. And then I just rotate through my fingers whenever I'm doing the test. So
do you test every day?
Pretty much every day. And mainly it's for wine these days. I have to confess. My wife is a certified somm, and there's no truth in labeling in wine. So we experiment with lots of different wines. So we want to kind of like see what the wines actually did to us, whether it fits within our world and still remain in a ketotic state.
Wine biohackers.
Yeah, it's kind of like a good piece on that. So those are kind of like your three tests. And then we come to like looking at both ketones and glucose, because I think if you're not doing both, you're definitely missing the picture here.
Yes.
But there's a little bit of a GKI formula. I don't want to go too much into that for this one here. But I think it's important to find a different reasoning to testing for somebody who is an athlete and understanding it. And testing with both glucose and ketones is the important part. So I think when we go on to the next bit, we talk about how to assess and how to address those items. So baseline, This is you. This is you as an individual. You need to know what you were like in the morning about an hour after waking. Why do we say an hour? Is there's a thing called the dawn phenomenon, that we get a cortisol spike in the morning. That's to get us ready. And that spike comes enough, and then it kind of like blows off after roughly an hour. I say roughly because there are some people that I've known that it's almost taken them until noon for that to blow on off. They have quite high glucose levels in the morning. That might help you if you're doing your morning run a little bit. But I've seen some people that, you know, they're a little bit more sedentary, but that would take a while. So we need to know what your baseline is. What are you? And for me, 83 is perfect. That's normally what I am, which is about 4.7 millimoles for the Europeans. 83 milligrams per deciliter for your glucose measurement is what some would say is the perfect measurement. Dr. Bernstein, or the Bernstein protocol, would certainly say that. And then I've got pre-prandial and pre-exercise, and post-prandial and post-exercise. So I like to test myself before having something to eat, or before I'm going to do some exercise. And then I'm actually going to test myself after I've eaten, maybe about an hour, or when it's after exercise, I do it immediately after the exercise, and then I do it about an hour later. So let's kind of like do a food bit first and then an exercise, or do you want me to do the exercise bit first and then food?
So you're saying in the morning, doing it an hour after you wake up?
Yeah.
Wait, so if you get up at 4:30 in the morning, like I do, so you wait till you're 5:30, that's usually when I'm working out at that time. So does it make a difference if it's earlier because your cortisol level is probably higher? I mean, it'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, what's called baseline. If this is your normal routine, then do it as your normal routine. I would say wake up, get yourself down to the gym there. By the time you've got yourself ready for your workout, or if you're going to the yoga shala, doing Ashtanga early in the morning, like some cray people do, you can do it just before that moment. That's still that you're going to get a 2-in-1 for that one, which I think is even better. You're actually going to get, like, you've allowed that time for a little bit of blow off, and then you're doing that just before that exercise, or just before that meal piece. Because what we're doing is we're measuring what's in the tank when it comes to ketones. And your ketones will always be lowest in the morning. But say, for instance, you started in the morning and you've, say, got about a 0.9 or maybe a 1.1. I'm normally between 1.1 and 1.7 on my ketones. And everybody's different. I'm not advocating higher ketones is better. I think don't go chasing ketones is an important thing, and understanding your bio-individuality is important. That's going to kind of like tell you what you've got in your tank. Now, what you're kind of trying to do is, what is your metabolic edge? So say, for instance, let's use a cyclist that's going to be cycling over the next hour, and they know what their normal wattage is. If you measure yourself after that hour, and you kind of like saw that your ketones came up during that period, and you were at 1.1 or 1.2 or even higher, well, you left something in the tank there. So you now know what your wattage is during that workout. So then the next thing is say, okay, what am I today? All right, I've got that in the tank. It'll be very interesting to see if I work at a slightly higher pace, how much I've got left in the tank at the end of it. And that you're having ketones, because in endurance, you're trying to work to your absolute metabolic edge without getting to that depletion. You're getting in that perfect edge of the envelope zone. And this can kind of tell you. And then I do the 1 hour plus after that, is to see how much of a bounce do I get from my ketones afterwards. And I think that's an important piece that you can get in on for an endurance athlete.
Because the goal is to be burning fat. So our ultimate goal as endurance athlete is be fat adapted. So eating and training and managing our stressors, so we're burning fat as our main fuel source and improving our metabolic flexibility. And then we want to know all right, how can I exercise without spiking my blood sugar? How the blood sugar and ketones will go up after, like before, during, and after. Like, how is the glucose and ketones going to change if you're training at a maffetone? We call it max aerobic function heart rate. Phil Maffetone created years ago. So if we're training in our fat burning heart rate ranges versus doing speed work, how does that impact our glucose and ketones during exercise?
Right. And you know, for some people, it's going to be very different to others. And
Yes.
I cannot, I mean, for me, it was very interesting when I joked about Ashtanga yoga people, because I did it for many years, and we would get up at 4:30 in the morning and be down at the yoga shala at 5:30 a.m. And there I am, you know, measuring my blood. And, you know, it was very interesting that when I had that difficult practice where it just didn't seem to feel right, I just been pushing too hard. When I look back at my ketones were well depleted down. And to me, that kind of like said, yeah, you pushed too hard on that one. But when you got those ones where it was sort of like, it was in that sweet spot and it was almost easy, and you kind of like suddenly go like, well, hold on, what was that like? And they were, you know, I still was like at my 1.1 at the end. I was like, okay, great. You know, that's the sort of breath pace that I need. That's the area that I should stay in. And then it's kind of like, how do you develop that edge over time? I mean, Zach Bitter, he just did the Western States run and that 100-mile run. And
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's a guy who really knows how to work his metabolic edge. But he's been doing it for a long time at slowly increasing that up. It doesn't come overnight. I'd like to ask your opinion, Debbie, on what you think on like fueling strategies, and even being in a state of nutritional ketosis, the ability to actually increase potential carbohydrates into your body and working your carb edge. Because you know the one size fits all, the 20-gram carb rule. You know, some people can do 55 grams of carbs, some can do 75 grams of carbs. Some people say, should you have a little bit of carbs as a pre-workout? I mean, these are the contentious things. I mean, like, I'm a super keto guy. I eat clean keto, but I'd be very interested in of what other people have seen and what you've seen.
Well, that's what we've done other podcasts with UCAN that Zach Bitter uses, and Vespa with Peter Defty talk about optimal fat metabolism. And Zach Bitter uses, well, no, he doesn't use UCAN, I don't think, but he does use F-bomb and Vespa. And so I think what everyone experiments with or is wanting to, or, you know, should, is experiment with what you can tolerate. And I'm experimenting myself. I'm not able to race long distance right now, but just working on more endurance, is that, you know, how much is that Goldilocks effect I call? How much is too little carbohydrate? And being so fasted that, yeah, I can burn fat for a 2-hour run, but would my performance improve if I added a little Vespa in there or have a little before? And I just recorded a podcast on this the other day that I think we get so obsessed with zero carb and feel like, I'm an amazing athlete, I'm a superhero, I can do a 3-hour run and have nothing to eat. And everyone, you know, you read on social media will brag about how long they could exercise with zero carbs. But if that's causing additional stress to me, my body feels like that's too low, that's going to contribute to a chronic stressor and cause what happened to me. In my book I wrote, Life is Not a Race, that I have, you know, breakdown and burnout from at a cellular level. So you're damaging perhaps your mitochondria instead of improving them. So I think it's just fine tuning, as you said, N equals 1, it's by individuality, but how many carbs do we need is so hard, and there's no magic answer. I think you have to look at your exercise, the duration, the intensity, you know, the weather conditions. But for me, myself, I'm trying to experiment with, what if I have a little bit of Vespa before a long run and see how that makes me feel, rather than just have my coffee and heavy cream and water and think, you know, I'll be okay. But if I could be faster and have better recovery and repair, I think that's what we have to honor, that sometimes we do need a little more carbohydrate.
And so, you know, if you take a look at that a little bit, you know, it's the timing of the carbohydrate and the quantity of the carbohydrate in relationship to the actual athletic, what you are. You don't want to have too much carb that's going to signal to the liver to say, hey, you know what, I don't need to be producing ketones. You want to be maintaining that dual fuel mode.
Yeah.
And so you can deliver that 1-2 punch. And so remember that if you're you can only have 2 teaspoons of glucose in your bloodstream at any one time. And really after that, you've either got to use it for energy or you've got to have an insulin response to bind onto that glucose and that'll put it into it. So it's finding how much can get into your bloodstream, and you can have still use that little bit of that glucose for maybe additional power, but still maintain that long duration fuel that you can get from ketones. Because, you know, if you think about on a sort of like historical level, going back into our way primordial history, I mean, you know, the reason we're down to the sea 200 miles to get to the salmon run as it's coming on in, and then walk from there to follow the herd to get to the elk for another a week without, because if you had to stop and eat all the time and settle on down, the herd's always going to get away from you, isn't it? So you got to be able to keep moving. But when you get there, you've got to have that power, right, that from that glycogen to get onto the kill there to get that animal. And so I always think of glycogen as the slow fill up of the powerhouse. It just takes a long time to there, and you're obviously going to have ketones as the consistent energy. But with an athlete, it's this balance of not getting the inflammation and being able to carry that all the way forward to the optimal zone.
Yeah, I've experimented in, you know, when it's a warmer time of year up here in Seattle, I'll go for summertime and spring, go, you know, 5, 6, 7 hour bike rides and have something a little more carbohydrate at the end. So it's like, you know, a little gasoline, just fire that you just have this, like I can go higher heart rate and sprint, do like a time trial to the finish line is my mindset, that you can go hard. So it's kind of fun that I can, you know, just not have anything, or have, you know, some nut butter, some type of fat if I need something. And I've done this for 15 years, so my body's used to it. But, you know, it's kind of fun sometimes to see how fast can you go. And if you add a little extra carb fuel at the finish and kind of simulate what you would do in a race.
Precisely.
A good experiment. I
mean, all of the Tour de France riders have color-coded bottles.
Yeah.
You know, the question is that color code signifying that they want to do a breakaway soon? So they're like pounding in a huge amount of glucose that's into that time. Are they wanting to make sure that the domestiques are pushing harder on the ketones on those ones on that front end that's coming on into play? I mean, for the endurance athlete, remember that endurance athlete isn't always healthy. It's the worst thing you could probably say to them, but like, how many athletes have really ruined their bodies for the attainment of this amazing goal?
Hello. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, to spread that message.
I know, and it's sort of like, you know, it's kind of like, how can you attain those goals and also push the envelope of your health and health span and longevity, as you said, at the end of the day, reducing that inflammation, having the recovery effects that you get from it, utilizing a ketogenic diet for that aspect is
what, we lost that part, but so we just missed the last part. You're just saying, you there? Okay, I think you're back. You're frozen. So bad connection again. Sorry, guys. What I want to get to, if you can hear me, Dorian. We lost him again. So what if we use the testing as Keto Mojo, find your baseline, find pre-exercise, post-exercise, experiment with that with your food and your heart rate monitor. So using heart rate.
Sorry, you're back.
Oh, there you are. Are you coming back?
We're back.
So we lost whatever you're saying. Lost a little bit.
Sorry, guys.
It's all right. So I just wanted to put that all together. So I think I've done heart rate training since Sally Edwards created Heart Zone training back in, I feel really old now, the late 90s. And I started doing Ironman in 2001 and low heart rate, max heroic function 2003, and working with Mark Allen. So I did all this low heart rate training. And I really am a big believer in using heart rate monitor to figure out where to train. And I did metabolic efficiency testing on people. What would be so cool is if I still able to do that, the company got sold to Lifetime Fitness. But when we had the new Leaf testing equipment to test where you're burning the most fat, and if it'd be so great to have, you know, continuous glucose monitor or use a Keto Mojo on clients to see where they are burning the most fat, and then just measuring their ketones and glucose.
I think CGMs are great tools. It's a shame that the big biotech companies like Abbott and Dexcom don't make it more affordable for some people. That the only way they can get it is if they have a diagnosis of type 2 diabetes. But they're cool pieces of kit, and I think that somebody who can afford it to have that into their arsenal to understand. I was talking with Dr. Ian Lake, and he had been type 1 diabetic and followed the NHS guidelines and was not doing very well. And then he went keto, and he decided to put keto to the ultimate test of running from Land's End to John O'Groats, which is the entire length of England. And he recorded his data all the way along. And it's really fascinating to see how his sugars change in his relation to his runs, to his weather, even to his stress at the time. And it's a pretty good tool for definitely for type 1s and for athletes. But if you're only measuring glucose, you're seeing half the picture. You got to get your ketones in there.
I know. So talk about this chart that our faces are covering over here on the side. I don't know if I can move it, but if we can look at what the level of ketones you suggest for nutritional ketosis, and then moderate ketone and post-exercise keto. Because you read all these people that are athletes testing their ketones and their glucose, and they're like, oh, my glucose is higher after I work out, and my ketones are too low, and everyone gets frustrated and confused.
Yeah. So remember, these are a guideline. They're not an absolute. Everybody is different. What we measure is in the tank. We don't measure how well your liver can produce ketones, nor how well your mitochondria can receive those. So quite often I see in people first starting, they go like, wow, look, and I've got these massive ketone levels, and ketones are like flowing through their body. Well, that doesn't necessarily that your mitochondria is ready to receive that. And what happens is over a period of time, your body changes, your mitochondria changes, you get better to receive it, your liver becomes more efficient to actually send it out, and then you get to your homeostasis, that is that. And that can actually, even that can change over time. So we've tried to design this to fit most models, but it's not going to fit all models. So there's an inner line and there's an outer line. So the outer line is sort of like what we're talking for a therapeutic, if we're doing for cancer or epilepsy, or something like that. There's a different, you got to realize that the reason of doing a ketogenic diet for an athlete is going to be different to somebody who's doing it for weight loss. It's going to be different for somebody who's going to be doing it for a cancer or epilepsy or something like that. So moderate ketosis, according to Volek and Finney in their book, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living, great book if you have it. It was like the seminal book on, especially when they did low carbohydrate performance with the faster study. They say that nutritional ketosis begins between about 0.5. So anything over 0.5, you are in a state of nutritional ketosis, and that's great. Then the moderate ketone zone, where I personally run between about 1.1 and 1.7, that's your moderate. You've got a moderate amount of ketones, and then you've got this deeper ketosis, and I also look at it as post-exercise, because you can get this bounce afterwards of ketones after doing an endurance race. You can come on up there, but they're all on a gradient curve. I'm not saying 3.0 is post-exercise ketosis. It might be for someone who's always a little bit lower. They need to swing that around a little bit to come on into play, and so that needs to make a difference.
So I've heard too, some people have said that if you just show 0.5 ketones, that shows you're burning fat and you're burning some ketones, and that's good for athletes?
Yeah, I mean, Louis Filzenor is one of the leading athletes who was notorious for having low ketones. And so, and I don't know exactly whether he was doing it before or doing it after or just saying, hey, I'm low in the morning. So I don't know about that. So he's one that says, don't go chasing ketones, chase results.
Yeah.
But the question is understanding how your journey starts from being a glucose burner to being a dual fuel burner, understanding your bio-individuality. Now, if you're super efficient at producing ketones and super efficient at burning ketones and always maintain a constant, that's you. You probably don't need to prick your finger, and that's kind of cool. I think on one of my last slides, I mentioned about, you know, you shouldn't live your life to pricking a finger. Once you kind of like learnt your body, learnt your way, then after a while, it's sort of like, I test I'm in ketosis, I test I'm in ketosis. Why do I keep testing if I'm eating the same foods I'm used to eating? I know how to live my life my way. But I do test for my curiosity, and in my wife and I world, it's wine. Well, we live in the Napa Valley after all.
Yeah, good place to be. So I am studying for a podcast we're doing next week on women are not small men. Dr. Stacy Sims did a whole book called Roar, and really researching, you know, even the faster study was all on men. And there's not a lot of studies of women because we're complicated.
Yeah.
We have hormones, and, you know, there's low hormone phase and high hormone phase, and then there's postmenopausal. So have you seen any differences yourself with your company working with men versus women on,
Absolutely.
athletes?
Absolutely, 100%. And I can even give you an N=1 with my wife, eating the absolutely same foods, different portion control that was on it. And yet she went for a period of almost 1.5 years, was always lows, 0.4s, 0.5s, 0.6s, maybe getting a 0.7. Then through inadvertent work, fasting, doing one meal a day, then there became a change, and now she's into the ones and the mid ones. But my wife is post menopausal, which was brought on, well, hastened by having breast cancer, so went into instant menopause. Don't recommend that for her. Certainly don't recommend it for any guy when your wife does go into instant menopause. But you know, she's been a cancer thriver for 5 years, and I think her body has definitely changed over time. Women's body seem to hold on to fat a lot more. It's a lot harder for them to lose weight. There's always the classic kind of, hey, you know, I can just look and put heavy cream in my tea and I can lose 20 pounds. And yet for a female, they have to be, sometimes it is a lot harder. I definitely say it is a lot harder, and there are definitely different responses to in that respect. But I still come back to the one side that, you know, don't do one size fits all, or even day two sizes. It's bio-individuality. It's learning your body, because one woman shouldn't be compared to the next woman, really, and certainly not to another guy.
Well, I keep saying that's every podcast, every court is N=1, bio-individuality, different thumbprints, we have different genetics, different stressors, and all of that. So that's why it's so important to do testing and do this, you know, use Keto Mojo. I'm such a big fan because you just can't prescribe everyone the same food plan, and getting a food sensitivity test is so huge, and looking at your genetic makeups too. And I like DNA Fit, they're out of the UK as well. And looking at, you know, how your body responds to certain foods. And it's so fascinating to get all this information for those people who are biohackers, or you just want to improve your athletic performance, or, you know, look at longevity, which is my focus now. Isn't, you know, racing Ironmans anymore right now. Ideally, you know, I want to be able to again, but it's longevity, and it's looking at my mitochondria function and how to improve that. And I think testing this to figure out what to eat, because my next question is with fasting, intermittent fasting, one meal a day, a lot of people are doing, you know, lower carbs, eating more fat and protein, and people doing carnivore. I think you get full, which is why it works, so you're not hungry to eat anymore. But have you, you know, learned anything from testing blood sugar and ketones with people doing more fasting, intermittent fasting, keto, carnivore, anything with that?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, coming on to this one, this is talking about different people's food sensitivities and bringing in carnivores and that part. So first of all, testing, will too much protein kick you out of ketosis? Maybe not, but will too much protein suppress your ketones? Maybe yes. Can the likes of Danny Vega eat half a cow and still be in ketosis? Yes, he can. Good for him. Yeah. But there are other, like you said, small men, let's call them ladies here, that cannot do that in any way, shape, or form. And so, this broadcast like carnivore is the way to go. I don't agree with that, because I think bioindividuality has a massive amount. Do some people have a problem with sugar alcohols? Take a look at that pre-workout, that keto food, or any of those things, because I'm suddenly about to lose power. So I'm going to do a quick switch and plug on in. Whoops, sorry guys.
I'll keep talking.
We can keep going on that one there. I was like, oh my gosh,
well,
almost died.
I think, we should look at when we're at KetoCon. I'm sure you guys are going to be there. I'll be a speaker at KetoCon talking about all this, but how all those erythritol in keto foods that have all those sweeteners, how your body responds to measure people after they've eaten all those keto packaged foods with the fake sugars.
Yeah.
It'd be a good study to do too. It's like, oh, I can eat cookies and chips and all this stuff, but all that, those fake.
So using a hi Gems. So using a glucose monitor and ketones together, just how you can sleuth out whether or not a food is causing you a problem. If you see a glycemic response, your glucose go up, and then you know that there was a hidden sugar in there or a hidden glucose. But now if you're eating a keto food and you don't see a glycemic response, but you see your ketones drift down, this can give you a proxy for the fact that perhaps you had an insulin response to a sugar alcohol that is in there. And I do have an insulin response to sugar alcohols, sorbitol, mannitol, not so much on erythritol, but most of the tolls will take their toll on me. So I personally keep away from, I look at those sugar sweeteners, they're sort of like methadone to the heroin addict. Yeah. Once you've been keto for a while, you really don't need a sweetener in any way, shape, or form.
No, I just looked at the time and I don't know how I've been talking so long. So we just got 5 more minutes left.
Okay.
Of our
we can whiz through the last few address. So, as we come to it, you have a lot of these different data channels, which we mentioned earlier on, between like Fitbits and Apple Health and Chronometer, for obviously the level and keto and Oura rings. And you can use all of these data sets to come on in to help guide you. And then it's, what are you going to do with that information afterwards? Yes. It's sort of like learning your body and addressing what you've done. There's no point in taking that data set and doing nothing with it. You have to be able to address it to see if you can get your performance to be better. But there's a huge number of tools at your disposal.
I think that's a challenge for most people is, our area of opportunity is all this data. And then what are you doing with it? How do you apply it to your own life and make it beneficial for fat loss, performance, longevity?
And I have to tell you, it's an extremely complex area, and that's where coaches earn their stripes. When you see all of this data, it is applying that is there. It's applying the knowledge. And, why do all the best athletes have coaches? Well, it's because they're focused on trying to do this part, but the coach is looking at all the externalities and trying to refine that individual into the best expression of what they're trying to achieve. And, it's hard to be your own coach.
It is. I always like a coach when I'm training. I was going to Ironman Canada this year, and I decided I'm not healthy enough to put that stress in my body yet, even though it's been 8 years. And it's like, I like to have a coach, even though I can write my own work about it. It's just nice to have someone to share things with. But I must say, all this information, it makes coaching, especially being a health coach and triathlon run coach, that I've raised my rates over the years, because it's so hard to, you want to coach people as individual, but you have to realize the amount of time it takes for the coaching side of it to interpret all this information and create a program for you as an individual.
Yeah. And so we kind of like come to the final part there. I mean, I'm kind of like, I'm really much an advocate to this, these last 2 points that is on it. Cast off your training wheels. There is, once you've learned yourself, you have to decide as to what you're trying to achieve and when. If you're trying to get that moment of a zenith as an athlete, then you use your coach all the way up to get to that point. But do you need it after you reach that pinnacle? Can you pull back and just say, yeah, I learned myself and I'm pretty cool with the way that they are. And then you don't need to. I mean, we find that people test a lot to begin with, but then it peters out after a while, and then they don't need to test. And in my world, that's the sign of success. And there's very few medical device people who say, like, if you don't need me anymore, we're good. You know, because you are now healthy, or you now know you as an individual for what you are trying to achieve at that moment in your time. And then when it comes to bringing it back again, you recalibrate, you reboot, you go like, all right, and it's the first quarter of the new year. I'm getting myself ready for this run that I'm going to have in Q2 in spring. And, you know, this is where I bring it back and get my focus back on it. It's the most important part.
Those are words I say all the time. You need to pause, reset, and reboot or recalibrate the whole you from the inside out. And you have to get all this data, and we get it from our Garmin and our power meters and hopefully your heart rate. But how do you know if you're really improving your health as we keep going? And I think that's why we need to test and not guess, and Keto Mojo and functional lab testing.
And you know, you look at what's going on you're looking at what's in the tank with your engine, and then you can see what's going on the rev canter, and that's like from your pace that you're doing or whatever, and you look at both of those things together and evaluate and bring yourself forward.
It's learning how to take this information and work on those micro adjustments to figure out fueling for your training, and then for day to day what food we should eat. But you just have to tweak it. And so using, as you said, we had the slide on a long time of when to take the blood glucose and ketone measurements before workout, post workout. Maybe, you know, when is there times that we need to use that information, go, oh, I should have eaten something? I mean, is there a time you get that information, but how do we apply it to our fueling plan?
Yes, precisely.
Yeah, so you have to experiment, as you said, and, you know, work with a coach to get this data and figure out how to apply it to your goals, your main health complaints. If you're, you know, focus on fat loss is one area, but, you know, everyone wants that, but also optimizing your health, and for athletes, athletic performance. And then there's another category that hopefully everyone's focused on is longevity. And, you know, even Ben Greenfield in my Keon program, and he has a new book out and it's all about longevity. So even, you know, the biohackers of the athletic world are now all about longevity too. So hopefully everyone is focused on the long run.
I mean, what was it in the movie Serial Killers, where his father was an athlete and he dropped down dead really quickly, and you're like, well, hold on, you're an athlete, you're supposed to be super fit. Yeah. And what's the point of doing all this work if, I mean, I hope I got my grandmother's genes and will go to 96 like she did. But the scary thing in America is, for the first time, the current younger generation has less of a life expectancy than their parents. I think that's one of the most disgusting things in the world, in this first world country. And I think that what will happen in the future is the next generation of parents, if they are ketogenic or are living a low carb lifestyle, they will be teaching the next generation how to eat properly. And we've got to look for that way to actually make a real fundamental difference.
And so using Keto Mojo to figure out if you're eating the right macronutrients for you to balance your blood sugar is the main goal. To be fat burning individuals, it doesn't matter if you're an endurance athlete or not, but the main goal is to be burning fat, because if you're burning glucose and your blood sugar is high, that's going to lead to all sorts of chronic illnesses. So the main goal is to optimize your health by being fat adapted. So there's a lot to it. If you're burning if that blood sugar is high all the time, we got to work on some issues or send you to your doctor.
True.
Okay, so we've got your info. You guys go to Keto Mojo and Facebook, got all the Instagram stuff on the screen, and conferences. You guys are busy this year. What's coming up next?
Oh my, we do roughly 2 conferences every single month.
Wow.
Actually, it's hard. I think we're going to be in Europe this year for the 7th annual symposium for neurological disorders. We're going to be at Keto Live in Switzerland. We've got KetoCon. We have, I think we're doing OMI, functional medicine. So I keep losing track of every single one that we are in. Have I missed any?
That's a lot. That's pretty impressive. Well, hopefully you guys can keep doing what you're doing and make that impact. You're a great inspirational story.
And I just remembered, if you want to find out where we are, you can go to the bottom of our page. We actually have a link that says events, and we interlink with all the events that are going on. Some of the ones that we'll be going to, this is at the bottom of our webpage, but also all of the low-carb keto events around the world as well. So if you hear of one and we don't know about it, put it on there and we'll let everybody know.
Oh, good. Well, great. Thank you for your time today. And if anyone has any more questions, just send them to debbiepotts.net, and you can find me there and the Low Carb Athlete on Instagram and Facebook. So thanks, Dorian. I'll see you guys at KetoCon, if not before, and we'll hopefully see what else we can do this year and help getting athletes healthy on the inside and out.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.